Hey, I am here to talk about my SPED talk, and I've chose to go over WebSockets because it's something I'm using pretty heavily for my senior project. So a WebSocket is a persistent two-way communication between a server and a client. Um, Normally in computer science or software engineering, if we have a program or an application that has multiple parts that all need to communicate with each other, a common approach we would choose is a RESTful API. Um, WebSocket, I kind of think of it as the opposite of a RESTful API. Sorry, these lights were about to turn off. The reason I think of it as the opposite of a RESTful API is a RESTful API is sorry, I was going to mix up stateless, excuse me. A REST API is stateless, meaning the requests are just on demand. And a WebSocket is stateful, meaning there's a persistent connection that's always present. So, for example, if you on most on a RESTful API, you'd have a client who requests information from the server, like a weather server or something. It sends a request through HTTP, and it gets back a response with the data, like the weather of the city. But the server doesn't keep track or really do much with the data of the client other than just send him the data that they want. With a WebSocket, the client and the server are going to be keeping track of each other, and that communication just remains open as long as they are connected until one of them chooses to close. So a WebSocket it doesn't use HTTP to communicate, but it does, it uses HTTP to start. It's what's called the handshake. These blue arrows kind of can visualize that. The client sends a request to the server via HTTP request, and the server responds back, and the handshake is complete. From there on out, these red arrows represent the continuous WebSocket protocol communications between the two. The client can send a request to the server, and a server can send a request to the client, and they can both communicate with each other. So I'm using this for my project with this little microcontroller. It's going to control a vending machine, which it will be the server essentially, and then the client will just be the user interface that someone would use to choose what snack they want to buy in the vending machine. And so this website I've got up is a really good example of how WebSocket works. This website can walk you through how to set up a client and server, and then get it to do something, and visualize how the WebSocket is stateful and persistent. So I have the program pulled up here, and I have established the connection with the client. The way it works, the code just has this HTML code embedded in the string, and then that's the HTML is basically what you'll see on the client side. And so when the server starts, the serial monitor will give you the IP address that you'll need to interact with it via the client, and that is this IP address right here. And you can see I've connected and disconnected to it a few times. That's what the other messages are. And then I can just send messages back and forth. If I toggle this, you'll see that LED turns on and off. So it's an example of a stateful persistent connection because the client is sending information and the server's doing something with that information. And the client and the server just kind of waiting on each other to get messages. Unlike a RESTful API, where the communications are just on demand, the server just kind of sends data when data is requested. And so, yeah, this is how it works. And I hope that this taught you a little something about WebSockets. And